Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of Wisdom's Wednesdays with CCI. Today, we have an amazing guest. This is Dave Kustin. He is a CEO and founder of Element M, which is an amazing brand strategy agency, and we are really wanted to know a lot of things about it. Thank you for joining us, Dave.
Thank
Zia
you for
Mohi, we have our COO here, and obviously with his amazing comments and advices, and our Q&A queen, Gavi, and our business development leader as well. So, Dave, we are very excited to have you today. How are you? For those who don't know you yet, who is Dave Costin? How did your journey begin in brand strategy and your entrepreneurial life?
Okay. Thank you for having me. So I started my career in 1997 in Los Angeles, working in film and television. Without going into a lot of detail, the almost 10 years that I spent in Los Angeles was really centered around storytelling. And again, working in film and television, picked up a lot of lessons around storytelling. Maybe the most fundamental was they all kind of have the same elements, which are good guy, bad guy, problem, solution, beginning, middle, end. And the last thing I did in Los Angeles was I started a company with some partners where I was responsible for building the brand. And so, I got really clear with myself that I really love this brand building stuff. I love using that framework of storytelling to build a brand to connect with someone. And at that point, I moved back to Fort Lauderdale from Los Angeles, and I started my career in the marketing agency space. And I use that framework to help all my clients tell their story in the marketplace, whether it's a sales environment or a traditional advertising environment, digital marketing environment. That framework has served me well for 25 plus years. And that's my background. I started an agency in 2009 called Element M. I started a content marketing business in 2014 with a business partner. And again, I've used all those storytelling lessons to help build those brands.
So let me ask you, what brought you from LA to Fort Lauderdale?
So, well, I went from Fort Lauderdale to LA.
Okay.
What brought me back was our first child was born. My wife and I, we had our first child in Los Angeles in 2003. And, it was a confluence of things. Number one, I was kind of fatigued by the city of Los Angeles, the industry of film and television. My business partners it wasn't necessarily all great. And so, but valuable learning lessons, buying a home in Southern California was a challenging. So, again, all those things. I was also in development on I'm going to throw a curveball. I was also in development on a cooking show, and went to culinary school in Los Angeles. And the cooking show concept was it had a great foundation, but I couldn't get it off the ground. So all of these things kind of led me to be like, oh, I'm done with LA. So that's what brought me back.
Is it weird that all I want to do now is ask you questions about this cooking show because I love cooking and there's like nothing that makes me happier than cooking?
There is the cooking show has been with me for 25 years. It exists still, not as a cooking show, but it is a platform for teaching. And I'll be launching that, more intentionally this year, or maybe even like now, real time. I'm working on a book, so yes, ask me anything you want about cooking.
What's the premise of the show?
So it's really, again, it's not a show yet, but the premise is the same. The intention is the same, and that is, so I grew up a latchkey kid. I'd come home in 1983, 1982. My older brothers took off, and I had to feed myself. I had to entertain myself. And so at the time, PBS and cooking shows were really the only thing that was on. So, excuse me, I would watch cooking shows. I had no awareness at the time, but I stuck with it. I became a cooking show, I don't want to say aficionado, but fan, right? And so growing up, as I got older, I worked in kitchens, prep cook, line cook, sandwich maker, all this kind of stuff. And I still was watching cooking shows. And my criticism of them became, well, they didn't do any teaching whatsoever. It was showing, it was demo, but no teaching. And so when I went to culinary school, I'm like, the world is missing this. It needs this. And so in parallel, at this time I'm in my late 20s, and I'm much more aware of my peers and kind of how people live or don't live. And none of my peers were really good at cooking. And it wasn't like I'm expecting you to be a white tablecloth, chef. It's like cook for your spouse, your mate, whoever. It's like there was a lot of people that were really incapable. And so the premise of the show, the intention, the ethos of the show is to teach people. And that's it.
Dave, let me tell you, I think that is a genius idea. As I cook like 5 nights a week. Right. It's my stress reduction. That's what I go. I go to the gym, I play golf, and I cook. The cooking is what relieves my stress. Golf brings on stress.
Yeah.
And let me tell you. Go ahead.
I was just going to beyond the stress relief, which it is, and I relate to it that way as well. It's also about sovereignty. It's about I don't need the food delivery apps. I don't need takeout. Like coming home and looking in the cabinet and looking in the fridge, and you're like, yes, I can make something with that. To me, that's the place to get. Most anyone can follow recipes. The book I'm writing is not a recipe book. It's a guide to how to sort of light that fire within you about cooking. And cooking is just the vehicle to sovereignty and independence and command of your environment. And the kitchen environment is a really challenging one to command and have mastery over. And if and when you do that, it creates so much for the human, for the person.
And let me tell you, I feel the same way. And I know why people get so overwhelmed with cooking, because there's so many spices. There's so many different things in front of you that you're like, but isn't cinnamon and nutmeg and I don't know what the salt, and there's 40 different kinds of salt. Which one do I use? I didn't know what cumin is. Is that a person? And am I saying it right? And then what I start realizing is nobody ever taught them why that goes in.
Exactly.
And I thought to myself, like, oh man, like the fact that you said that, I'd never like kind of connected those dots, but mine was all trial and error. I just like cooking. And if I screwed something up, I'm like, okay, whatever that was, I'm never putting that in again.
And that's it. Sorry, Z, I interrupt you. Yeah. And I think that's the attitude. That's the spirit that I want to cultivate with others, which is, fuck the recipe. It's like, try, do, fail. Failure is the best way to learn. So, I want to teach people how to use the basics of cooking so that they can then, kind of do the math on their own. It's like learning math. 1 + 1 = 2. When you know the basics of math, you can then move on to the other, disciplines, if you will, and you don't need the formulas anymore. You don't need the recipe. Like following a recipe is kind of boring, and it takes out any risk, and it takes out any potential for learning, to some degree, not entirely, but.
So let me ask you. Let me like kind of connect the dots a little bit.
Okay.
Again, this just kind of clicked with me because I never thought of cooking as anything business related, but I failed more times cooking something than I did at anything else. Do you feel when you're able to have the confidence of trial and error and failing in cooking, that then you're then able to pass that along in business, where you're not scared to take that chance and try something new?
Well, what you'll read in the book when it comes out, there's parallels to business, and I draw those parallels and conclusions or those metaphors to business all the time. Absolutely. I mean, as a creative director, and I've been a creative director for many years, and that discipline is all about invention and risk taking and trial and error. And hey, does this language work? And does this visual concept work? I don't know. And in the environment that I've been in, I have to present that to a client. Sure, I wouldn't say I've been kicked out of the boardroom before for those ideas, but certainly rejection. And when they kind of shit on your design concept or your campaign, that's like burning the souffle, so to speak.
Done that one.
So, Dave, you've been working, you're moving from culinary stuff and film and television that obviously inspire you to do also brand storytelling. Why it's so important for a company or a business tell their story, and why?
Yeah. It's the most important. it's one of the most important things in building a brand, because that's what people connect to. So, that's how humans are wired. We're wired that way to, we sort of have two brains. We have the one upstairs, and then we have the emotional brain, kind of the heart or the gut. And so, storytelling has been a thing that we as humans have been doing for, 1,000 years. And that's what people latch onto. That's what people create an emotional connection to. And so when brands do that, or rather when they do it well, they have the opportunity to win someone's heart. And when you win their heart, you win their business, usually. And that storytelling takes place, or can take place, in so many ways from a business. Initial advertising, onboarding email, thank you emails. Like, there's a number of ways to touch someone, and to do it with more than just generic words, right? Like, you can create an experience for someone. Your brand isn't one thing, it's everything. So, I preach that to my clients. I've been doing that for a long time. It's every single touch point. Everything the light touches is your brand. And so treat it that way.
It's funny that you said about making a story. And I think I saw something a couple of weeks ago about Coca-Cola and Christmas.
Yep.
Because Coca-Cola said that they would notice that during the colder months that sales would dip. So they concocted the story of Santa.
Oh, and I've seen that too. Yeah.
It blew my mind. Could you imagine people sitting around saying, we need to create a way for people to drink soda in the winter?
Sure. Yeah.
And then they've now they've made Coca-Cola aligned with Christmas. The color of Santa's suit is the same as Coca-Cola red. Yep. Everything matches up. So when you think Christmas, you think Santa, you think Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And sales went up.
That's a classic tactic where, brands, especially in the consumer goods space, they the good ones, at least, or the agencies that help them work, they say, well, is there a holiday we can own? Mm-hmm. Right? Is there a part of the day we can own? And then you attach the brand to that, just like Coca-Cola did. It's really brilliant. There's a lot more noise now in the world than there was 106 years ago, or whenever they introduced that concept. But it's a effective tactic.
Dave, but you also have worked with brand award-winning strategies for MGM and Sony. Yeah. How did that happen? I mean, how?
So those that part of the bio, I think you might have misinterpreted that part of the bio a little bit. But I'll talk.
It doesn't matter. It keeps between us and the entire public that is watching. It's okay.
So when I was in Los Angeles, the company I started was this was in 2000, so a long time ago, when DVDs were still very much, kind of penetrating the marketplace. And so MGM was our first customer, where they were going back into their library of films and they were re-releasing movies on DVD that were never on DVD, prior. So we worked for the foreign release department of MGM, and they would give us an audio master for a film in English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish. And those audio masters would run at a different film speed in Europe than they do in the United States or in some other countries. So we had to digitize the audio. And if it were a mono track, we would artificially make it a stereo track. If it were a stereo track, we would artificially make it a 5.1 surround sound film. And so we also would clean it up. We got movies from the 50s and 60s. The condition of the audio masters were not very good often. So we would clean up the all the hissing, the ticks, the pops, the dropouts. We would, in a digital environment, fix that, and then we would hand it back to the studio, and they would go make they would press the DVD. So MGM was our first customer in that space. Sony was our second customer in that space, and that's the part of the bio that I did for them.
Still is important to mention it.
Sure, yeah.
Leah, I have a great question here for the audience.
Yeah.
Dave, was there a specific moment in your career when you realized this is what I meant to do?
Great question. And I think it was around the time where I was in Los Angeles, and my job was to, again, build the brand. And I was doing some things with no budget. It was all like, grassroots type stuff. And this was, pre-internet days. And so I created an ad for a film festival that we were sponsoring. And the headline of the ad was very punchy. It was very borderline. It could be offensive to to someone. And so we would start to see people in the industry at gatherings or whatever, and the name of the company was Widget Post Production, and so they would say, "Oh, you're the widget guys," and so I'm like, "Oh shit, maybe I'm good at this thing that I'm new at," and so it started to grow that way. And I'm like, you know what? If I don't want to work in the film and television business, there's no reason to live in Los Angeles. And so it was kind of like at that time.
Dave, when is a company know that is the moment to do a change of branding? Like I don't know, the company is like, okay, this is it, or because there are companies that are just so in love with their colors, their slogan, everything, and they don't want to change it. Even when you do rebranding, they just want to change that. When is a moment to do that?
Great question. Simple question, not a simple answer. So, a lot of times a company doesn't know because, to your point, they're in love with their own stuff. And, a way to know is to ask an expert, and certainly one that's going to give them an honest assessment. One that is sort of, the assessment and the response is rooted in some expertise, if you will. Another way to know is like, talk to your salespeople, talk to your marketing folks, like asking the questions. Does this brand still resonate? Does our name make sense? Does our tagline still work? And when I say work, I don't mean that from a sort of a mechanical standpoint. I mean that from a messaging standpoint. Do our name, brand identity, and tagline or messaging, does it occupy the position in the marketplace that we want it to? And again, it's hard very often for leadership to be objective. More often they're not able to be objective, again, because they love their own stuff. So it's good. It's like, when is it time to paint the house? When is it time to redecorate? It's like, it's a little bit like that. Other times are, well, you've acquired someone, you've merged with someone, or you've been acquired, or, those are some other triggers that are a good time to look at your branding.
Actually, can we talk about that for a quick second? Because I feel like in the next couple of years, we're going to see a ton of mergers and acquisitions.
Yep.
I think the market's just ripe for it. We saw a very tough couple of years, and you're going to see a couple people emerge, and they're probably going to buy up the competition, probably just for data, if nothing else.
Yep.
For those companies maybe looking to merge, what is some of the things that you look for to make that merger on the branding side as palatable as possible? And the reason I say that is, I don't know if you're a Seinfeld person, but do you remember when Poland Springs and Morgan Creek merged and they named it Moland? And it was just like a terrible name. Yeah. What are some of the things you look for that don't have a Moland effect?
So I've gone through. I worked for a private equity company once where they acquired, they acquired and were acquiring. Speaking of golf, brands in the golf space, and so they were doing a roll up of numerous brands, and I was tasked with creating a new name and brand identity and messaging for this portfolio of companies. And so, the first thing I looked at was like, does anyone have a great name already? We could just continue to leverage that name. And that's what I would do. Again, if I were tasked with, hey Dave, these two companies are coming together, I would first look at, does someone have a strong brand already? Is there a really compelling reason to keep one of these brands around? And then short of that, I would probably look at creating a new brand. And because that's a perfect opportunity to tell another story, a new story. It's great to go back out to the market. This company and this company are, 1 and 1 is 3, right? Like, that's the story, the sales story that I want to tell. And so it's an opportunity to go back to the market. It's an opportunity to go back to old customers. And so, that's, again, and I'm saying this as a completely objective person, right? I'm like, there's so much ego involved, Maria. There's so much ego involved in protection when brand is involved and company names and brand identities. It's unbelievable. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen kind of all the reactions, and it's so impractical too. It's like, get over it. Your baby's ugly. Your baby's ugly and it has a stupid name. And so, it's like that. And that's what I would look at. Does anyone have a strong brand to keep?
When was one of the projects that you were really excited about do changes of brand storytelling with Element M? Like you said, oh my God, we have this client and I'm so excited. Which one, do you have one story like that?
Well, I'll tell you, in 2009, I started the agency in 2009. And March of 2009, I had my first client. And it was a cigar brand, a boutique cigar brand. And, I was super excited because it was my first client. But it was also, I love consumer goods. There's a lot more latitude, I think, in the storytelling, in advertising. And, in 2009, it was still very much, call it traditional advertising. It was the very sort of early stages of social, and digital media, digital marketing wasn't really, I don't want to say it wasn't the thing, but it wasn't the thing. And certainly in the cigar space, we were still doing, full spread advertisements in Cigar Aficionado. And I was excited to tell that story. I'm a cigar smoker, so it really aligned with, what I like personally. And I liked it because it was challenging. Almost all the brands would typically advertise the same kind of way. And the product is a brown stick in a brown box. Like, how do you really differentiate? Yeah. Storytelling is the way to do it. So I was super excited about that.
Do you find it to be, when it's a commodity like that?
Oh, yeah.
Do you find it to be more challenging or more fun? Or like, if somebody's got like a software, you can kind of do whatever you want with the software because nobody really knows what the software does.
Sure.
But then when you're dealing like with cigars, it's like an avid, cigar fan,
Yeah.
I don't really know the difference until I smoke it. So a lot of times, kind of like with wine, the fancier they make the bottle, the more likely they are to sell it. So when it comes to a cigar, all you really have is a wrapper to make an impact.
That's right.
How is it like? So tell me the story, because I'd love to know how branding can help push a cigar one more than the other.
Yeah. So, very often, so getting back to the original question about commodity, I love taking on commodity projects because it is fun. It's a very distinct challenge to decommoditize. Mm-hmm. And so my approach was always, kind of like two levers. One was high up here, like branding and storytelling. Two is packaging. And there's the sort of literal packaging and then figurative. So the literal is, the thing you can hold in your hand, right? When you go to a store and you have two products that you believe will solve your problem, but one has much better packaging than the other. And then let's just say, for argument's sake, they're both priced pretty closely. You'll almost always pick the one that has the better packaging. Always. So that was my approach. And so with the cigar brand, and there's always nuance. In cigars, it's a little harder to do it, or in any category where the consumer does not have a high level of knowledge.
Yeah.
And that is cigars and wine, absolutely. But what we did was we ran a campaign, we built a campaign, giving you a little bit more context. So in the advertising business, in the cigar space, almost all of the brands, they kind of advertise visually in one of a couple of ways. One, it's just product shot. Two, it's the cigar maker. Like, okay, he or she is the brand. And so I said to my client, I said, I tore out all the ads of all the magazines in the offices. His name's Alan. I said, Alan, look at this stack of ads. This is how everyone advertises. Let's not do that. Let's do something different. He goes, Dave, moreover, I agree with you, but this is what the consumer in our category connects with. They connect with the cigar maker or maybe the winemaker in the wine business. So, it wasn't his ego to be in the ads, but he kind of had to be. And he was a startup brand at the time. And so I said, okay, if we have to do it that way, this is what we're going to do. And I created a campaign called Confessions of a Cigar Maker. And that was, the theme was Alan would speak directly to the cigar consumer. And he had a little notebook, just like a lot of us have, a little old-fashioned, Moleskine notebook. And he would sketch in there. And we opened the notebook and we put notes, like Alan's own thoughts about the business and products. And then we made illustrations, hired an artist to do illustrations. And, he ran that campaign for 2 years, and people sometimes still talk about that campaign. The year that he hired me, he was probably a sub $10 million brand. Last year, he exited for $75 million. Was it the ad campaign? I don't know, maybe.
I mean, how could you say no to that? What was the name of the cigar? No. What was the name of the company?
Alec Bradley Cigars.
Yeah, I used to do some work with Drew Estates.
Yeah.
And they ended up they got taken over too by a company up in Jacksonville, I think.
Yeah, the company that bought Allen's, they're the largest, I want to say the largest tobacconist or tobacco company in the world. I think they're out of Switzerland or Denmark or something.
Tobacconist sounds better. Sounds more fancy. I like it.
Technically, they're not a tobacconist. The retailer is the tobacconist. I misuse that word.
No, I love that story, and I love how you're able to kind of connect it and like kind of show like the value and like how you are able to turn a commodity into not a commodity, a story. You give it life, you give it an emotion, and that's what draws people to it. And I know the girls are going to beat me up because I know they want to ask their question, but I wanted to ask. So on the term of commodity, I wanted to ask your opinion when it comes to branding. What if, and I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario that may or may not be true. Say you're the number one beer in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And you make one wrong turn and your sales plummet. Okay. Yeah. At that point, it's very difficult to change the name or to rebrand or do something different, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody already knows the name. Now there's a small blemish on it.
Or a large.
What would you do? Yeah. I mean, yeah. Sales drop pretty hard.
Are we talking about a brand where the first letter is B and the second one is L?
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on that. They made an enormous misstep. I mean, it's they lost, I don't know, $30 billion in value or something. And really the misstep, it's not a branding issue. It was a strategy issue. The strategy was we're going to support, this thing over here. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. This other person, this other movement, we're going to support that, which represents exactly nothing with respect to our customer base.
Right.
So, it was like, you remember greenwashing back in the early days of environmental initiatives and movement. Like companies would do a thing just to say, hey, we're environmentally this or that. Like greenwashing. So I don't know what you call it in this scenario, but it's like that, where they attach themselves to a thing that, again, is meaningless to their customer base. I honestly don't have an answer for you as to how they could have gotten out of the hole that they dug for themselves. I don't know. You got to take your licks, I guess, take the medicine, suffer.
From what I've seen them do, they took the complete 180 approach. They went they overpaid for the UFC sponsorship.
Yeah.
They went 100% to the armed services route. They went full blown the other direction to try to save face a little. But the amount of money it cost them on the advertising and sponsorship side to cover up, where they could have just created a BLQ beer. And
absolutely is what they should have done.
Yeah, I'm like, why? You have a cult following. Why would you don't mess with that?
Again, this is why it was a strategy screw up.
Yeah,
they should have attached a different brand, not Bud Light. They have a whole family of brands. Like, let's attach, making it up, one of the seltzer, hard seltzer brands they have.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, forget the ad dollars. The enterprise value that they lost is
I look at the perfect place to look at is cigarettes. They have the Marlboro makes like 40 different kinds of cigarettes, and one of them is like they're each engineered to a certain demographic.
Absolutely.
It's the same product,
Yeah,
with a different color on it.
that's right. So I teach. I'm sorry.
Before we get beat up by the girls, we have to let
Okay.
them ask a question because I can feel them looking at me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please, finally, my turn.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, Dave, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice when you were starting Element M, what would it be?
Oh, another good question. So, oh man, yeah. I mean, part of my journey with Element M is, I early on, I was trying to build an agency, and building an agency is really hard to scale. And early on, I was very interested in scale because I love the work very much. I love being a creative director and solving those problems, those positioning problems. But it's hard to scale that, and so that's what gave birth to the content marketing business that I co-founded, which is called Content Bacon. Content Bacon is a business that has scaled to some degree. So what is the advice? Boy, I don't know. That's really tough. I mean, maybe I would have, if I go back, I would have thought about more scalable products or services at the time. Everything I did from the start was, all custom, kind of hate the word bespoke, but bespoke, and not scalable. So think of scale sooner.
When I hear your story, it reminds me of a book, this 6 Types of Creative Genius. I don't know if you've read that, but it's the same business that you're in, the same thing. You're talking about scaling is hard, but you like doing this, but you don't like doing the other thing.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, who was it that recommended that book to us? Was it Jen?
Jen Berkowitz?
Yeah, I think it was Jen. She recommended that book to us, and we ended up reading it. And I'm listening to your story. It's uncannily similar to the story in the book. So I would highly recommend it because it'd be like reading your own story.
Well, what happened at the time? Similar. What happened at the time? I was reading a book called Built to Sell, which is written by John Warlow. He's got a very popular podcast now. And so I'm reading the book, which was a parable about a business, a guy who owned an agency.
Yeah.
And I'm reading. I'm like, shit, this is about me.
That's awesome.
So,
that's awesome. All right,
So
ladies.
Dave, you're good to go. It's fine. You can say, but Dave, you're also a Bloom growth coach, correct?
Right, yeah.
You help leaders actually from chaos to clarity.
That's right.
What is that? And just tell us exactly what you do, how you help leaders to, came from that.
So Bloom Growth OS is an operating framework. It's a growth framework. And so I help leadership teams, I help business owners and leadership teams get more out of the business, to get what they're not currently getting or seeking, which is, growth, profit, fun. And so there's really like 3 conditions where a growth coach, and maybe Jen talked about this too, with scaling up. There might be 3 conditions where you would seek out a growth coach. Number 1 is, again, you're not getting the growth out of the business that you want. It may not be fun. And then scenario number 2 is there's dysfunction on the leadership team. There isn't a culture of accountability. Communication is really poor. Scenario 3 is there's a lot of growth, but it might be out of control growth. So you need to put some guardrails up, again, put a framework in place that, pulls for excellence and, with respect to communication, accountability, and again, that controlled growth. So that's what Bloom Growth is. And I help leadership teams and owners, unleash the potential in their business.
I like it. There's something to be said about you can't grow until you're pointed the right direction, right? It's I was reading a story. One of the guys were talking about if you're starting in Miami and you're on a boat and you are pointed towards London and you're 1 degree off, by the time you think you're in London, you're in Spain.
Sure. Yeah. Great metaphor.
So if you're like 1 degree off,
That's right.
if your foundation isn't set up properly and you do all this work to grow, then it's a lot of wasted effort.
Absolutely.
And just, I think with what you do is just kind of getting all their like ducks in a row before they do something. They're able to not only grow, but control the growth and have sustainable growth.
Yeah. And by the way, any of the coaching frameworks are really great. If an organization is implementing one of them, they're far ahead of their competition. And so, they're all good. We don't speak poorly of the competition. But it's a framework that really helps the business accelerate quickly.
Love it.
Awesome. Gabby, we have another. Yeah, go on, Miguel.
Okay, so outside of work, what experiences or hobbies have unexpectedly made you better at branding and storytelling?
Oh, well, the movies, television, that is certainly what led me to go to Los Angeles and start my career in film and television. And I wanted to be a director. And so, being able to write and direct, and I've directed things, I haven't directed any movies, but I've certainly directed, commercials and other pieces of content, having sort of a director's eye as for me, as it relates to, watching things, I absorb that content, I think, differently than someone who doesn't have that. And so I was always very interested, like, how are they doing that? How are they operating the camera? Where are they placing the camera? Like, things like that helped me, I think, get deeper into this world of storytelling and how can I now apply that to branding, selling, being a sales presenter, or, being responsible for sales. How am I going to tell this story such that the person on the other side of the table or phone or Zoom is going to care? So it's really about how, so those activities. And I'm not sure about the cooking part. There is certainly a progression in cooking, like there is in being a creative director or a business builder. Like there is a beginning, middle, and an end. I think the metaphors or the parallels in cooking and life and business they're a little bit deeper to kind of make those connections. But being a creative director and cooking, or a chef, the cooking has certainly helped me as a creative director.
Awesome. I have two questions for you, Dave, and then after Sia's feedback, as always, we will have a fun game for you.
Okay.
So Gabby will give you 5 different questions, and you just have to decide one, just right away.
Okay.
So the first two questions that I have for you before the game is, do you have a book, a podcast, or a mentor that definitely, transform your life as a leader, as a coach, and also for Element M, your company?
Yep. Oh, that's the question?
That was one. And then the next one was what's new, what's coming for Element M. So
yeah. Okay. I tell you, just kind of without thinking too hard about it, a lot of the business podcasts, entrepreneur podcasts, have been very helpful for me as someone building businesses, just to think a little differently or relate to others. Guy Raz, How I Built This. I love his podcast. The storytelling is great, very relatable. It's formulaic too, but the formula works. It's like, problem, rise, fall, rise again. It's really a great exercise in relating to others in your same space.
That was good. And then the other one was what's new or what's coming for Element M. How do you see your business,
Yeah.
growing?
So, I'm really focused on growing the coaching part of my business. And so I'm excited to work with business owners and leadership teams about unleashing that potential. That's one. Two is Gourmet. I didn't tell you the name of the cooking thing. It's called Gourmet Joe. Sorry. So Gourmet Joe is also going to, again, it's been sort of sitting on the back burner, no pun intended, for a long time now. But Gourmet Joe is coming.
Zia, get ready.
If you need any help with that, you let me know. I'm happy to help. All right, I'm happy to help. I can be anywhere from the food taster. I can be the guy with the apron, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you to it.
Thank you, Dave. Now, Gabby, let's go follow up our amazing games. Very short game for you, but let's
Okay.
just go. Sia, as always, you can, obviously participate as well. Go, Gabby.
Wait, because some of them are more focusing Dave. But okay, so I can participate. Okay, so what do you prefer? Building from scratch or rebranding something existing?
Oh, probably building from scratch.
And
Okay.
that's the cooking side coming out of me too. There's nothing better. Like I made a black bean soup yesterday from raw beans, and it was
Nice.
delicious.
Very good. I like it.
What do you prefer? A client who says make it go viral or a client who wants 5 logos by tomorrow?
Neither. Seriously, neither.
Okay, a brand with heart or a brand with hustle?
Oh, heart.
Hustle. I like hustle.
Sure, I respect the hustle.
Hollywood style storytelling or culinary style creativity?
Ooh.
I'm gonna go culinary.
As much as I love cooking, I think I'm going to go Hollywood because I just love what you're able to do with telling a story in a movie. I just love it. Just look at the show Dexter. You turned a serial killer into something you like. It's like crazy what you can do with a good story.
True. I think I was watching, Your Friends and Neighbors, which is on Apple TV just the other day. I'm saying to myself, this guy's a freaking criminal. He's doing all kinds of bad shit, and we're pulling for him. It's unbelievable.
It was like watching you. I'm like, he's a bad person, but you're like rooting for him. Like,
totally. Yeah.
Okay.
But there is something about getting your kids to eat vegetables that you can do on the culinary side. That's got to be spoken for. I'll just say that right now.
Yeah.
My turn, Sia?
Of course.
Okay. So a brilliant idea at 2 a.m. or a well-rested idea at 9 a.m.?
Oh, neither. It's the brilliant idea comes in the shower.
Oh, that's true. It happens to me too. And last one, listening to your gut or letting the data lead the way.
Oh man, gut.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Awesome.
You can make data say anything you wanted to say. Your stomach tells you exactly
That's
what
true.
you want.
True.
That's totally true. Yep. Dave, this was amazing. I think the time went super fast, to be honest. This was one of the quickest, podcasts we've ever had because the conversation was like so flowing so much. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you
A lot of
for
fun.
all your insight. Please, guys, that you're watching, go and follow Dave on LinkedIn and also go and check his page, Element M, which is awesome. He has a really, really cool stuff there. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Sia, obviously,
you
for your
all.
comment and feedback. Gavi, thank you for taking care of everything. And then I'll see you next Wednesday. We have more webinars coming soon. Dave, thanks once again, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
guys. Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.